It began 9 months ago. The killer Wuhan virus is showing no signs of abating. Every day we report about more infections, more cases, more deaths. But the question about the origin of the Wuhan virus remains unanswered. Now, more and more scientists are coming up with the claim that the virus was made in a laboratory. We cannot independently verify their claims, but we can speak to them and try to understand their hypothesis. Tonight, we bring you one such interview, a global biomedical expert who says the virus was made in a lab as part of a program run by the Chinese military. Listen to this carefully. He says the lab initially collaborated with France and the US in the name of developing a SARS vaccine. But soon these foreign scientists were sidelined, the collaboration turned into a competition, and vaccine research became a bioweapons program. These are major claims. And this is a world-renowned scientist we are talking about who cannot be dismissed. Before we bring you the interview, here are some pointers, that the things that we are sure about, that this pandemic began in China. We know that. Wuhan is the original epicenter. China tried to hide the initial outbreak, but it failed. And all of these things are a matter of record. What is still unclear is the origin. Did it start in a wet market in Wuhan where bats were sold? Or did it leak unintentionally from a laboratory in Wuhan? Or worse, did China unleash this virus as a bioweapon? For many experts, the lab theory is a non-starter. They don't agree. They say it's a conspiracy theory. But it refuses to die. Earlier this week, we spoke to Chinese virologist Dr. Li Mengyan. She fled from Hong Kong, allegedly after she tried to speak out about the Chinese cover-up. Dr. Yan says the Wuhan virus was made in a lab and the WHO is party to Beijing's cover-up. She has published a paper and called it proof. But her claims have been widely rejected by the scientific community. So who should we trust? What was really going on inside the Wuhan lab? Should you even consider the idea of a leak, or should the world just dismiss it? Professor Giuseppe Tritto says you should not ignore it. Professor Tritto is an internationally known expert in biotechnology. He is the president of the World Academy of Biomedical Sciences and Technologies, an institute affiliated to UNESCO. He has written a book called China COVID-19, the Chimera that Changed the World. It says there was a high chance of a leak from the Wuhan lab. Earlier today, we spoke to Professor Tritto. He says China has the capability to modify viruses and develop bioweapons. He says the Wuhan Institute of Virology did not follow the global standards for safety for a long time. And Chinese scientists were specifically working on bat coronaviruses, a project that was supervised by the military's top scientist, Shi Zhengli. Professor Tritto raises serious questions about the Wuhan lab. It is called Asia's largest virus bank. Scientists classify it as a P4 facility. A P4 lab is a lab that is supposed to follow the highest level of biosafety precautions. Almost all major countries in the world have a lab like this, and that includes India. They follow global standards for safety. And these labs are open to inspection by the world, but not the Wuhan lab. China does not believe in global rules. This facility has a checkered safety record. Professor Tritto told us that the Wuhan laboratory only notified its safety measures last year. That was in 2019. It's been around since 2014. This lab was conducting studies on bat coronaviruses, and interestingly, it is headed by China's leading expert on bioweapons, the PLA's Major General Chen Wei. What Professor Tritto told us today is what the world has long feared. He spoke to us from Rome earlier today. Here's the Gravitas exclusive interview. Professor Tritto, welcome to Beyond.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
You've said some very interesting things. You've called this a chimera, an organism that is created in a lab. You say that coronavirus was engineered in a Chinese laboratory. Why do you say that, sir?
This is a long story because starting from the SARS-CoV-1 epidemic in China between 2002 and 2004, And from this time, there was the interest of virologists in China, but also in the world, to study coronavirus in bats. This is what the first things. So it was a campaign in the world, but especially in China, to search all the coronavirus who were in this natural reservoir that represented by bats, especially some sort of bats as Rhinophilus or Souch bat. And Professor Xi Jinli was involved from the beginning on that because she was a great specialist in biology on bats. And she was supported by some international organization who work on the ecological aspect as Eco Alliance to begin to study this coronavirus, this SARS virus, SARS-like virus in bats. So people collected in many places in China from different virologists, different strains of this virus. And they begin to study their pathogenicity and virulence in relation to the man. Especially to find a vaccine against SARS-1. So it was the first relationship between China and France to create really a P4 laboratory, a really laboratory of security, high security level, to permit to store this type of virus, potentially pathogen virus, and also to begin to study together. But progressively, French people were no more involved into the general strategy of China on the study on virus. And the group of Xi Jinli was exposed to different teams in the world and technology that can be implemented to create recombinant virus in a laboratory.
I'll try to paraphrase what you said simply for our viewers. So the Chinese researchers led by Dr. Xi Jinli started to look for a vaccine for SARS, and they sought help from scientists in France and the US, but at some point that collaboration stopped and she started doing her own thing and developing lethal bioweapons. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, chimeric recombinant virus in laboratory. So they were not natural when you create in a lab.
So you're saying vaccine research morphed into the development of bioweapons. There are also reports that at some point the Wuhan Institute of Virology was brought under PLA Major General Chen Wei, who is a leading bioweapons expert. Is that a coincidence, or is it because they were onto something?
Dr. Chen Wei, who is a colonel of the military army, but of the medical military army, was a great hero in Africa when he attempted to create a vaccine against Ebola, also with the spray, a nose spray vaccine. So she has a big experience from the military medical part in China of the experience, the exposure to Ebola, Zika, etc., to protect the Chinese people who go to work in Africa too. So was the person that when the leakage happened in Wuhan and the situation was so critical in terms of the epidemic locally, the government asked to her and to military forces in China to close the environment around Wuhan. And she arrived with a team of medical doctors, a famous professor of pneumology, who is the president of the Association of Pneumology in China, and people who work on traditional medicine. So the idea was to circumscribe the area, to avoid leakage in all China, and to begin to work on vaccine.
You've made some very startling claims. Do you have proof of what you have said? Because other scientists, including a researcher from China, Dr. Li Mengyan, made similar claims, and her report has been rubbished by the scientific community.
Yes, I have seen the report of Yan, the Yan report, very briefly. Fundamentally, she arrived at the same conclusion that was a man-made laboratory in relation to the technology, the insert that we use it. She mentioned that there were two backbones were created in a military laboratory in China. That was ZC45, ZXC 21, you know, the basic backbone. But this backbone are well known because they were published by the university, military university in China. Surely they participate to the creation of a lot of SARS-like backbone to create a new virus in the laboratory, but are not directly linked to that.
Would you call this virus a bioweapon or an accident?
It can be a leakage, surely. This is an eventuality that coming from this type of laboratory, especially that was the first experience from the Chinese people and Chinese virology to have a P4 laboratory. You know, if you are not trained, you don't have a very strong international cooperation and supervision, you can have this type of accident. Also in the United States, in the military laboratory, there are accidents each month, but they are controlled, they contained, because they know the way in which they do that. They control all the people who enter and sort out from the laboratory with a specific security protocol. This was not done. The first protocol were published from Wuhan laboratory in 2019 on Nature and under the edge of WHO to show that people were trained to work in this laboratory. But imagine the laboratory work before too. Okay, this is the first thing. Second thing is the military side. If country can develop from the research, from the basic research, bioweapon. And we have the International Convention on Bioweapon. The only great country who show addition to this convention but never ratified the convention is China. But the sign that military people arrived in Wuhan to close the environment, to control the environment, to attempt to reestablish a normal situation in the laboratory is in any way a sign that military people knows what happened in the laboratory on Wuhan. But we cannot give the responsibility to them. They create intentionally these type of things. But surely these events show how is weak for the moment the international regulation on the world, how the United Nations don't keep a lot of attention on the activity of WHO. WHO is a simple an agency of the United Nations. On the contrary, in the last year, become some sort of public-private organization who manage a lot of money from private sources, and he lost the core of the mission of the United Nations. No General Assembly of the United Nations give the authority to WHO to become a public-private organization.
Right. And we'll also have to find a way to hold China accountable, but that's a debate for some other day. Professor Tritto, thanks very much for joining us and look forward to reading your book when it's published in English.
Very soon, very soon. Thank you very much to your channel. Thank you.